It all started with Donna Amelia, a strong-willed woman who life taught her to be strong from an early age. A widow for years, she raised her daughter, Carla, with the sweat of her brow, sewing, washing, and doing whatever was necessary to give her daughter a future. Amelia never had much, but she never complained. She lived simply, accepting what life offered her. Even with her husband's departure, she clung to Carla, her only daughter, as her safe haven. But life is sometimes a merry-go-round of pain. Carla, unlike her mother, grew up with a difficult attitude, with shouts and harsh words. For her mother was a burden that she made sure to make clear. Amelia, however, endured everything. Her heart warmed when she looked at her grandson, Samuel. With him, everything was different. The boy would snuggle up next to her, listening to her old stories, laughing at her silly jokes, accepting a piece of cake and a hug. Samuel was the reason for Amelia's smile, the reason she insisted on staying, even with Carla pushing her to the corners, and Sandro, her son-in-law, treating her as if she were invisible. She wanted to believe that her presence was still necessary. And so, the days passed all the same, with Donna Amelia becoming almost a forgotten plant in the corner of the room, ignored, but always there, until one day the peace was broken once and for all. In the kitchen, while Amelia stirred a pan on the stove, the smell of plain rice hung in the air. Her wrinkled but firm hands made the movement automatic, as if cooking was the only thing she still knew how to do in a world that seemed to have no place for her anymore. In the living room, Carla was impatient, rolling her eyes and fiddling with her cell phone, as if everything around her was insignificant. Sandro, her husband, was sprawled on the couch, legs stretched out, his face closed, exhausted from life. Samuel, 11 years old, watched his grandmother from afar, with curious eyes full of an emotion that not even he understood. The scene was the same as always. Amelia was cooking, washing the dishes, folding the clothes, and no one even said thank you. She knew she was more of a nuisance than a member of the family, but even so, it was the only place she wanted to be. Suddenly, Carla sighed loudly, irritated. "Mom, for the love of God, would you stop banging the spoon like that? That noise is getting on my nerves." Amelia lowered her head, as if the sound of the spoon was a crime. "Sorry, daughter," she murmured. But Carla didn't even let her finish. "That noise is getting old all the time, Mom." Sandro, without taking his eyes off the TV, snorted. "There's no way, Carla. Your mom has already given what she had to give. She's getting in the way more than helping." Amelia's face burned. The words hurt more than any physical wound, each sentence a knife tearing into her soul. She tried to keep busy, cleaning the counter, straightening a crooked cloth, but the silence after those words was unbearable. Then a crack. The glass that Amelia was holding slipped and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor. The noise cut through the air like a scream. Carla jumped from the sofa. "Again, Mom? For the love of God, you can't even hold a glass." Samuel stood paralyzed, eyes wide, breath held. Amelia tried to bend down to pick up the pieces, but Carla stepped forward, took the cloth from her hand, and screamed for the world to hear. "Enough! I can't take it anymore. You're nothing but trouble. It's time to understand. You're useless." Sandro, in the background, murmured, "It's about time." Amelia stopped. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from pain, shame, and a sadness that seemed heavier than her fragile body could bear. She looked at Samuel, who had tears in his eyes and trembling hands. The boy tried to run to his grandmother, but Carla held his arm tightly. "No, Samuel. She's leaving now." Donna Amelia stood up slowly, carrying the weight of a lifetime. She said nothing, didn't scream, didn't beg. She just picked up a bag, a suitcase with some clothes, and looked at her daughter one last time. Her look was not one of anger, but of farewell, of someone who knew that from that moment on, something had changed forever. She walked out the door, feeling the cold night breeze on her face. The street was deserted. The dim lights of the street lamps illuminated the sidewalk, like distant eyes watching in silence. There, alone, Donna Amelia walked without knowing where to go, without knowing who still cared. But deep down, one certainty grew. Life still had a lot to teach, but not for those who thought they knew everything. Amelia walked slowly, the weight of her suitcase hurting her tired shoulders. Her legs ached, her breath short and labored. The night was cold, and the yellow light from the street lamps cast long shadows on the asphalt. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if the ground wanted to pull her down, as if her whole life was screaming, "You have nowhere else to go." She thought about going back, knocking on the door and begging to stay. But no, pride, or maybe pain, held her back. When the wind picked up, Amelia stopped and sat on a park bench. Her hands trembled, and tears fell slowly, wetting her wrinkled face as she looked up at the dark sky, searching for answers. "Mrs. Amelia, is that really you?" The voice came softly, surprised, full of care. Amelia turned her head and saw Donna Dalva, the neighbor from across the street, carrying grocery bags. Dalva was a simple woman, with an easy smile and grey hair tied in a bun. She always said good morning and offered a cup of coffee, but Amelia never imagined that Dalva would notice her so much. "What are you doing here alone at this time of night?" Dalva asked, her eyes narrowed with concern. Amelia lowered her head, embarrassed. "I have nowhere else to go." Dalva paused for a moment, trying to understand the depth of the pain that Amelia was carrying. Without thinking twice, she dropped the bags on the bench, held her friend's hands and said in a firm tone that brooked no refusal, "You're going to my house. No matter what happened, you can't stay on the street." Amelia tried to refuse, shaking her head, but the words died in her throat. She was too tired, her loneliness weighed like a wet blanket. Donna Dalva picked up her friend's suitcase, held her by the arm, and took her to her house. It was a simple little house, with peeling walls, but lit by a warm light of affection. Inside, the smell of brewed coffee and cornmeal cake mixed with the sound of the low television. "Sit here, Donna Amelia. I'm going to make you some tea." Amelia sat down slowly, her eyes still red and her hands in her lap. The room was simple but cozy, with old photos on the walls, a rosary hanging on the headboard, and a worn-out rug that gave it a homey feel. Dalva brought the tea, sat down next to her, and after a while, in silence, asked softly, "What happened?" It was there, under that dim light, between sips of tea and sighs, that Donna Amelia told her everything. Her daughter's coldness, her son-in-law's contempt, her grandson's interrupted hug. Dalva listened without interrupting, just holding her friend's hand, squeezing it every now and then as if to say, "I'm here." After a while, Amelia looked at Dalva and whispered, almost confessing a secret, "I've saved money my whole life. I haven't told anyone, not even Carla. I just wanted to help one day." "Money?" Dalva asked in surprise. Amelia nodded, her eyes lowered, her voice hoarse. $2 million. Dalva's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at Amelia with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She knew that that money had no value to someone who had been thrown out like an old burden. Amelia took a deep breath, and for the first time that night, smiled slightly. A small, shy smile, but full of determination. "I know what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to help those who deserve it." Dalva remained silent, respecting that decision as a sacred promise. And together, the two simple women, sitting on the worn sofa of a humble house, seemed to carry more strength than any hidden wealth. That night, Donna Amelia slept peacefully, because she knew that life still had much to teach, and she was ready to leave her own lesson. The morning sun entered through the cracks in the window of Donna Dalva's simple living room, painting the floor with golden light. Donna Amelia opened her eyes slowly, smelling the smell of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. For a moment she thought it had all been a nightmare, but it wasn't. She was there, lying on a neighbor's sofa, with a bag of clothes at her feet, homeless, aimless, without her daughter. Donna Dalva appeared at the door with a calm smile, holding 2 cups. "Good morning, Donna Amelia. Did you sleep well?" Amelia took a deep breath, sitting up slowly. "Better than I expected. Thank you, Dalva, from the bottom of my heart." The two sat at the small table. The coffee was simple, but the welcome was as warm as a hug. Dalva looked at her friend, her eyes curious but respectful. "You mentioned money yesterday. Is that really true?" Amelia smiled at the corner of her mouth, a tired but serene smile. "Yes, Dalva. I saved every penny I could. I worked my whole life as a seamstress and a nanny. I saved as much as I could. Many years ago, I received an inheritance from my father. I saved everything and the money grew," Amelia continued. "Adding up the inheritance and my savings, it came to $2 million. I never told Carla because I know who she really is." Dalva's eyes widened, but she didn't ask anything else. It wasn't her money, and deep down she knew that the money had been saved carefully, not out of greed, but out of love. Donna Amelia stayed a few more days at her neighbor's house. Dalva treated her like an older sister, took care of her, offered meals, and helped her as much as she could. Amelia, in turn, helped with small things, washing dishes, sewing torn clothes, making coffee, and little by little, sadness gave way to gratitude. It was on a grey afternoon that Amelia made a decision. She looked at Dalva, who was sewing a torn blouse, and said, "Dalva, I want to help you. You and your husband have always treated me with dignity. I'm going to leave you some money to renovate this house, buy Joanne's medicine, pay the bills." Dalva tried to refuse, but Amelia held her hand firmly. "It's not charity, it's recognition." Dalva cried silently, squeezing her friend's hand. Amelia smiled, and at that moment, something inside her was freed. The pain of being rejected by her daughter was still there, but now there was a greater purpose. Sometime later, Amelia moved to a nursing home. It was a simple but welcoming place where the caregivers called her by name, where the elderly talked like old friends, and where the smell of coffee and cornbread seemed to fill the hallways. Amelia felt at peace. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was bothering anyone. She would sit in the garden, feel the wind on her face, watch the birds in the sky, and there in silence, she knew it was the right place to start over. One afternoon, while drinking tea, she called the administrator of the home. "Miss, I want to make a donation." The woman was surprised. "Mrs. Amelia, that's not necessary. You've already paid for your stay." But Amelia smiled calmly and firmly. "I want to help. This place is special. Take good care of it." And so, without fanfare, Mrs. Amelia left a generous donation, ensuring improvements to the rooms, medical care, and even a new garden for the elderly to enjoy. No one knew the exact amount, but the home was never the same again. The walls were painted, the rooms became more welcoming, and the faces of the elderly, previously dull with time, now smiled brightly. But Amelia didn't forget Samuel. That same week he showed up at the house by surprise with a drawing in his hand. "Grandma, I drew the lady in the garden with the flowers." Amelia looked at the paper, tears welling up without warning. She hugged her grandson tightly, as if the whole world could fit in that hug, and it was at that moment that she made the most important decision of her life. She sat Samuel down in front of her, held his small hands and said, "Samuel, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. I saved some money, my son, money that's for you." Samuel's eyes widened, not really understanding. "You'll only be able to use this money when you turn 18. The boy tried to ask more, but she squeezed his hand affectionately. "I want you to grow up knowing what respect is, Samuel. I want you to never let money be more important than people. This money is worthless if you don't know how to be a good man." Samuel felt her, her eyes shining, his heart beating fast. He didn't understand everything, but he knew one thing. His grandmother was the strongest and most generous woman he had ever known, and in that simple garden, amidst the scent of flowers and the singing of birds, Donna Amelia smiled, because deep down she knew true wealth was not in money, it was in the love she left behind. The news came like a sharp whisper, spreading to the corners of the neighborhood. Did you know? Donna Amelia, Carla's mother, made a huge donation to the nursing home. They say it was a lot of money, enough to leave anyone speechless. Carla heard the whispers for the first time at the market while she was choosing fruit. A woman commented quietly, without realizing she was nearby. "Yeah, no one would suspect hidden money, right?" Carla's blood ran cold. Her heart suddenly accelerated, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She turned around slowly, trying to hide it, but her thoughts ran like a hurricane. Donation, lots of money, but my mother never had anything. The way back home was a jumble of jumbled memories. The times she had seen her mother counting coins to pay for bread, her old clothes, her worn-out shoes, her faded purse, and suddenly everything seemed strange. Had she been hiding something all along? Carla couldn't concentrate. Sandro saw her distressed, asking what was happening, but she didn't answer. Samuel, in the corner of the room, drew in silence, his gaze intent on his mother, as if he knew more than he was saying. Carla didn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned, her eyes wide in the darkness. The next day, she woke up determined. "I'm going to that nursing home. I need to understand what's going on." The morning sun lit up the streets when Carla arrived at the entrance to the home. It was a simple but welcoming place. There were flowers in the garden, some old ladies were talking under the shade of a tree, and the sound of soft music echoed through the hallways. Carla felt small there, but she took a deep breath and went inside. The reception, she asked for her mother. The attendant smiled politely. "Donna Amelia is in the garden reading." Carla walked down the hall, the sound of her own footsteps echoing like a drum. Outside, she saw her mother sitting on a bench, a book on her lap, her glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Her white hair shone in the sunlight and her face looked peaceful, more peaceful than Carla had ever seen her in her entire life. "Mom!" Carla's voice came out lower than she expected. Amelia looked up slowly. Her gaze was calm but firm. Carla tried to control her breathing, but anger and nervousness were exploding inside her chest. "I heard some things about you, about money, about donations." Amelia calmly closed the book, adjusted her glasses, and answered softly, "Yes, daughter. I used what I had to help those who treated me with respect." Carla's eyes widened, unable to hide her indignation. "What do you mean, Mom? You had money all this time and you never said anything. You never helped us?" Amelia took a deep breath, as if she knew that this conversation had come too late. "I tried to help, Carla. I tried to give you what I could, my time, my love, my care, but you never wanted that." Carla crossed her arms, her face red, her pride wounded. "That's not fair, Mom. That money belongs to the family. I have a right to it." Amelia looked up, and this time her gaze was sharp, cutting like a knife. "What belongs to the family is respect, Carla. You have lost the right to that." The silence fell like a weight between the two. Carla opened her mouth to speak, but the words died in her throat. She tried to force a smile, tried to say that it was just a misunderstanding, but Amelia just shook her head as if to say, "No need to pretend." "I left everything to Samuel," Amelia added, her voice low but firm as stone. "He'll be able to use it when he turns 18. Until then, he'll learn what it means to be a real man." Samuel, who had been watching everything from afar, slowly approached, stood next to his grandmother and held her wrinkled hand affectionately. Carla looked at her son, his face flushed, his chest heaving, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, holding hands with his grandmother, his eyes filled with a glow that Carla couldn't understand. Donna Amelia took a deep breath, looked up at the sky and let out a slight smile. The breeze ruffled her hair, and in that moment, she seemed free. Carla turned, almost tripping over her own steps, her face burning with shame. The garden behind her grew small, distant, as the weight of regret began to settle in, like an echo she knew would not fade away any time soon. The garden of the nursing home was simple but beautiful. There were colorful flowers, an old swing creaking gently in the wind, and wooden benches where the residents could feel the sun on their faces. Donna Amelia was sitting on one of these benches, her hands resting on her lap, her serene gaze observing the blue sky. Beside her, Samuel, with his legs swinging back and forth, was holding a sketchbook. They remained like that for long, peaceful minutes, without saying anything, as if the silence between them was more valuable than any conversation. Until Samuel, curious, broke the silence. "Grandma, why did you give them so much money here?" Amelia slowly turned her face, looked at her grandson tenderly, and calmly answered, "Because they gave me something that no amount of money can buy. Respect. They looked me in the eyes, Samuel. They treated me like a person, not like a burden." Samuel thought for a few seconds, then spoke softly. "And will you leave the rest of the money to Mom?" Amelia took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and then looked at him with a sad but firm smile. "No, my son, the money will be yours, but only when you are of age." Samuel's eyes widened, his mouth half open. "Mine?" Amelia nodded. "Yes, Samuel, but you need to understand one thing. Money is just paper. What really counts is what we do with it. I want you to grow up knowing that the greatest legacy someone can leave is not money, but the way you treat those you love." Samuel remained silent, digesting those words. The wind ruffled the leaves of the trees. The sun warmed their faces, and the distant sound of laughter from other elderly people completed the scene. Amelia took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, her chest felt light. She thought about Carla, about her daughter's fury, about the harsh words, about the humiliations. For a moment, the pain wanted to return, but she pushed the thought away. Carla had made her choices, and she, Amelia, had made hers. "Grandma," Samuel said suddenly, interrupting his grandmother's thoughts, "I promise I will never treat you badly, and I will never forget you." Amelia smiled emotionally. A tear escaped her tired eyes, but she let it flow, stroked her grandson's hair and said softly, "I know, my son, I know." That night, Carla sat alone on the bed, her gaze lost in space. Her mother's words echoed in her mind like a sentence she could not erase. She thought about everything, the day she had thrown her mother out, the way she had treated her, her son who now seemed more distant. Regret suffocated her, but now it was too late. In the nursing home, the routine remained simple. Amelia spent her days helping other residents, telling stories, teaching them how to sew. She was respected there, treated with affection, with dignity, and that was worth more to her than any fortune. When people asked her why she helped so much, she would respond with a calm smile. Because life is easier when we learn to value what really matters. Months later, on Samuel's birthday, Amelia organized a small party in the garden of the home. There was a simple cake, colorful cups, and balloons hanging from the trees. Samuel appeared with a tight hug, and Amelia received him as if he were the greatest gift in the world. "Congratulations, my boy. You are growing up. Always remember what I told you. We don't measure a person by the money they have. We measure them by the respect they give to others." Samuel felt her smile, and at that moment, he seemed to understand everything. More than understanding, he seemed to feel. Another day, Amelia was sitting alone in the garden in the late afternoon, the sky tinged with orange, the trees swaying gently. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. A gentle breeze ruffled her white hair, and she thought with a light heart, life teaches those who despise the simple. One day they discover too late that they have lost the most valuable thing they had. And with this thought, Donna Amelia went on in peace, knowing that her story Her courage and her dignity would be remembered not for the money she left behind, but for the love and respect she taught to cultivate.